Alrighty, here we go again. So I've got this little bit of software called Little Nav Map, which looks like a pretty cool tool. So it's the first time I've used it before, so bear with me as I try and figure it out. But essentially it's similar to the software I was using before, but obviously there's a far lot more going on with this one. So we're picking up an Otaki, but this time I've chosen the Cessna 172, which is an aeroplane that I've got a few hundred hours in real life. Over the years, to be honest. So it's one I'm certainly more familiar with than the VL3 that we've been flying lately. So I've set it up to be a dawn departure, and we're going to just do another VFR flight down the coast here from Otaki. We'll fly to Paraparaumu. We might do a circuit entry and a touch and go there. That'll be on runway 34. So I've turned on this little overlay for the traffic pattern, which is kind of cool. And from there, we will continue further south past Paikakariki here, and then into the Paraparaumu harbour to the Paraparaumu inlet, and we'll follow this road over this terrain. These are the Hayward mountains or ranges to Silverstream, past Upper Hutt here, and make our way over the Rimutaka ranges, following the road again. So we're not going to fly this path directly, we'll actually just see how it looks with the cloud conditions following State Highway 2 across this valley here. Looks like it keeps jumping back. I can probably turn that off. Let's see. I'm sure there's a button to stop it from jumping to the airplane all the time. Aircraft, see if we can find it. Tools. Map. Send to aircraft, that'll be it. And then we will make our way into Martinborough, which is a little village just south of Masterton. Where is it? There it is. Okay, so we'll see Lake Wairapa on the right. We'll pass Featherston, the little village, as we come out of State Highway 2 through the Rimutaka ranges. And there's also another township called Greytown. There's Carterton, and eventually Masterton is the major town in the area further north. But we'll make our way here to Martinborough. There's quite a bit of vineyards in this area as well, so Martinborough is known for its wine, but it's a pretty boutique wine, not a lot there. And you can see I've got a couple of other waypoints lined up for a subsequent flight. So that's the plan for today, is we'll depart Otaki on the south westerly track to probably do a circuit at Paraparaumu, and then continue south past Paikakariki, Paraparaumu, across the Haywards into Silverstream, State Highway 2 over the Rimutakas, south of Featherston, and we'll land at Martinborough, which is a pretty short strip. So let's see how it goes. It could even be too short for the 172. If it's not looking good, then what's that, 2,500 feet, so about 700 metres, that'll be fine. No worries at all. So looking at the Wellington meter, it's the nearest. It's not much wind, good visibility, no cloud, 9 degrees, QNH 995, so actually a pretty nice day here. That gives you a bit of an idea about where we are in relation to Wellington. That's down here, and the city is sort of all around the bay here. Alright, without further ado, let's jump in the airplane and get it going. So we've got a stunning morning here, a little bit of scattered cloud around. So this is the Cessna 172 without the G1000 cockpit. This is sort of the version I prefer to fly, to be honest. It's what I'm most familiar with. So the checks I can do based on memory pretty well, because we've got all the knobs and buttons that we need. So the fuel shut-off valve should be closed there, and we're on both tanks for the fuel. We can go mixture full rich now, and master and alternator goes on. Some people would do the alternator secondary to the battery once the engine started, but I see no reason not to just turn them both on. Mags on both. Beacon goes on. Parking brake. There it is set. Prop area is clear. So again, full throttle. Quick burst on the fuel pump. We see some fuel flow here. It's only a 4-cylinder engine, so we don't need to do that for long. Fuel pump's off. Crack the throttle and crank the starter, and it should fire up pretty quick. If it was a cold start like it is here, for some reason I can't get the mags to go, it should start with a few blaze, and it does. Never have to worry about starting a hot engine in the sim. It always just goes. So we would be looking for oil pressure coming up in the green, which is just at the bottom of the green, but idling a bit low. We'd want about 1000 RPM there, and oil temperature will slowly start to come up. So we don't have a CHT gauge, that's cylinder head temperature. We don't have one of those in a 172. Generally, once you get above 250 horsepower with the 6-cylinder engines, you start to see CHT gauges, but it really depends on the aircraft. That's not a that's a general rule, but it's not always the case. So if avionics go on, we could also do the dead cut check. So okay, so the engine was going to stop. So that shows us that we have a good ground on the mags. Put the nav lights on. Should be some panel lights which we can just turn on here while we're getting organised. Alright, transponder should have been in standby. We'll set the VFR mode if I can get there. I'm just going to turn track IR on here so I can crouch down a bit. Find the button. It's going to let me. Can't seem to get it, so we'll do it the old-fashioned way. 1200, and we can just put something arbitrary there, 5,500 feet, because we don't want it squawking at us. We've got Paraparaumu set as our waypoint. It's only 10 nautical miles away, so it's not going to take very long to get down there. I'm just going to turn this yoke off so that we get a better view of the flap control. So at this point, you're really just waiting for oil temperature to come up. See, that's come up super quick. A real aeroplane with 9 degrees outside. We're going to get 8 degrees. That's going to take a lot longer to come up. So that's not very realistic, unfortunately. Okay, so we've calibrated the altimeter there. 2951 doesn't mean much to me in New Zealand. We do have a little sort of annunciator panel, we'd call it, so we can test that, which would show us if we've got low vacuum. So that would be primarily for our AH and our DI here, directional indicator. Low fuel, left and right. We've got plenty of gas, which we can see here. And oil pressure is fine, which we can see here, and volts. And we can check that. Here we've got 28 volts, so that shows the alternator's working. And here's our little ammeter gauge down here. And this is actually showing like a drain of about, I guess you'd call that about 15 or 20 amps, which again I'd be pretty surprised, once you've got the alternator on, then you'd expect that to be showing a bit of a charge, because it would be recharging the battery after having used the starter, whereas this is showing like a real time drain based on the all the items that we've got connected to that bus, so the GPS and the autopilot and the transponder and the lights. So you wouldn't expect to see a drain like that while maintaining volts. It's not possible. So if I turn the alternator off, okay, so you turn the alternator off and suddenly you get a big amp draw. So I'm just trying to think about that. So that's showing that we've got all of that amps being drawn. Alternator goes on. It's showing I think it's the wrong way around, to be honest. I think that's modelled incorrectly, because you would expect with the alternator on there to be a slight positive charge of amp showing that there's the battery is being charged, and you turn the alternator off and that should drop down to show that you're discharging, say whatever that is, that's showing over 30 amps, so it should be a discharge of the battery, and we can see the volts dropping. So I think that's just modelled in the opposite sense, so just something to keep in mind. Alright, so the engine's warmed up enough. We're just parked outside this hangar here. We're going to taxi over and take off from runway 34 to our right. Where's that big bastard tree? There it is. And so we'll pretty much just make a taxi and we'll do a short run up over there, and away we go. So there's no CSU, constant speed unit, in a 172. It's a fixed pitch propeller, which makes our life pretty easy. So we may need to adjust the mixture a bit depending on how high we get a bit later on. So I'll go ahead and set flaps 10 for the departure now. We can check that that's travelling, which it is. And otherwise we will make our way to the runways. So taxi lights go on, parking brakes released, and Otaki traffic, Delta Mike Oscar, Cessna 172, taxiing to backtrack line at runway 34. Alright, where we go. So the first thing we want to check is we power off the parking stand here, because if the brakes don't work, then we're going to have to take that into consideration. Okay, away we go. Just going to turn down this glare shield light. If I can find the button, there it goes. Yeah, very nice morning. So we should see some pretty awesome graphics on the departure here as the sun's coming up in the east. Okay, so we can just line up and do our run up on the runway here because there's no other traffic around. I'm just going to go to the left of the grass strip. About there is fine. I'm going to do a stop. I'll set the parking brake. Okay, so back to idle at 1,000, 1,200 or so. So the first thing we do is check that all temperature and pressure is in the green. We don't want to do a run up if we've got the engine out of limits. Really, that's only going to cause more damage. If the oil pressure is not in the right spot now, then it's only going to cause damage to it. So you can see it's actually just below the green range, which you'd expect idling at 1100 RPM. It should be in the bottom of the green. So again, this is not very well modelled. So we'll bring it up to 1700 RPM. That's about right. Okay, so now we check our T's and P's. So all temperatures in the green, all pressure is now in the green. Okay, so now we check our mags. Just going to turn track IR off. There it goes. Okay, so check the left mag, and we're looking for a drop of no more than 100 and 150 or so, which is fine. Back to both. And it should go up by about the same amount. Okay, check the right mag, same thing, and we're looking for again drop no more than 100 and a difference between the two mags of no more than say 50 to 75. Back to both. Get into bed, for God's sake, what are you doing? Get into bed. Close the door and get into bed. Shh! Get into bed. Okay, so that's pretty good. All temperature's gone up quite a bit there. So now we come back to idle. So this is like a full idle. We want to make sure that the engine doesn't stop if the idle was too low. But that seems okay. So back to 1,000. T's and P's still in the green. Now we'll do our pre-takeoff check. So trim is set for takeoff down here, and these placards are really annoying. These little pop-up tooltips, massive. Don't need it. It'd be good to be able to turn that off. I hope they allow us to do that at some point. Okay, so trim is set. Throttle friction, I've talked about that in my checks before. So this is the throttle friction here. This is, you can just sort of turn this clockwise to make it harder to push the throttle in and out. So you want that to be fairly tight so that the vibrations of the engine don't mean that your throttle comes out and you lose power, particularly on takeoff. So trim set, throttle friction, nut set, mixture full rich, fuel cock is on, which is on both, and instruments checked, which we did, T's and P's, ammeter we checked, and the ignition is on both. We'll do the controls, so we do full free and correct movement, and the rudder as well, and flaps we set at 10, and hatches and harnesses are secure. So get track IR going again. I'll just get this squared away. That's about right. So now we can do lineup checks, which will be really hard to find the right spots here. Okay, transponders on alt. Line the heating bag. It's so slow. Okay, altimeter's calibrated, and the lights, strobes, and landing light can go on now. Fuel pump on for under 1,000 feet. Okay, Otaki traffic. Delta Mike Oscar is rolling runway 34, vacating south to Paraparaumu. Okay, that's it. Parking brake is released. Have a good look around first. All clear. Away we go. So there's full power. Check the T's and P's, they're still in the green. Just concentrating on keeping the aeroplane straight. And we start to feel it getting pretty light on the controls about this point, so I'm just increasing the back pressure and really just letting the aeroplane fly off itself. There it goes. There's no landing gear this time. Undercarriage, I should say, to retract, so just looking for about 70 knots in the climb. Need a bit of nose up trim. And I'm just keeping it on full power. Next milestone will come at about 400 feet when I put the flaps up. And we should get that nose down pitch change. Okay, flaps are travelling. Flaps are up. So that'll give us a little bit more climb rate, a bit more speed. Okay, all clear on the nose. Clear left, there's that road bridge we saw last time. And we'll start our turn for the coast and make our way south towards Paraparaumu. There's the Otaki River, Kapiti Island. State Highway 2. Okay, 80 knots is pretty good for a cruise climb. So now it's a question of just trying to find that balance again of what the attitudes look like in the sim, so I can get my climb and my turning and cruising attitudes correct. A bit of cloud there, which I'd like to avoid, so I'm just going to lower the nose to get under that. And we can turn the fuel pump off there. And I'll turn the taxi light off, but I'll leave the landing light on. You need quite a bit of nose down trim now. Not that much. Okay, and as we accelerate in level flight there, I'm just going to bring it back to 2400 RPM for cruise today. So you're really just listening for that first change in the tone of the engine. Okay, I'll just do that again. So if I come back to 2500, and now I'll bring it back 2400, you can hear that change in the tone of the engine. So we don't even need to look at the gauge. We just listen for the change in tone and we know we're at cruise power. Alright, we'll clear down the coast. Paraparaumu. If we follow that coastline around, that takes us to Paraparaumu. So Wellington's airspace, I think it's 3,500 feet above us around here. So as long as we stay below that for now, then we'll be clear of that. Pretty slow aeroplane, 110 knots. Hardly setting the world on fire in a 172, but they're very stable aircraft and great for scenic flying and training because they're slow and predictable, very docile flying characteristics. Not as much fun as the VL3, to be honest. See quite a bit of drift there actually, from right to left again. So you can see that I've been blown in quite a bit from the coast, and I'm continuing to be blown in with this westerly. Pretty obvious there. So this is the township of Waikanai coming up on the left of us here, and this is Waikanai Beach. And this really just blends in all the way into Paraparaumu. It's sort of one continuous sort of urban area, but it's all low-rise residential. It's a really nice part of the country. And Kapiti Island down here on the right, South Island in the distance. Paraparaumu, Delta Mike Oscar, is 5 miles to the north, 1,500 feet, tracking to pass overhead and join downwind runway 34 for a touch and go. So we'll just fly straight over the airfield, turn left into the downwind. The key thing about Paraparaumu is these hills here. If you extend too far downwind, you can actually get quite low if you're keeping it tight around these hills, so we need to be a little bit careful. We can see the river running along here as well. So essentially once we're south of the airfield, then we will not extend too far downwind. So I'm at 1,500 feet or so, which is pretty good. The airport is right in the middle of the township. It's just here. In fact, maybe it's just there. So we'll cross over the field. This hangar here is a distinctive landmark, and start our descent as we pass overhead, so that we're 1,000 feet by the time we join downwind with the left turn. Sorry, track IR back on. Really nice lighting effect on the instrument panel there, with the sun rising in the east. There it is, it's just coming above the hills. Very cool. Beautiful. Almost looks like there's some different wind effects on the water there, different currents. It might just be the satellite image that's giving that effect, but it looks pretty cool. Aerodrome beacon flashing at us. So here's runway 1634. This is a disused cross vector. In fact, there was 2 disused cross vectors now. This was an old military airfield, so it's in that typical triangular shape, the 3 vectors. Now the only one that remains is 1634, and as you can see, because it's right in the middle of this built-up area, there's been quite a lot of political pressure for them to actually shut the airport down. But there is a resistance against that, so with a bit of luck the airfield will stay open, because it really is an awesome airfield. I've done a number of training flights out of this airfield. I did my aerobatic rating here and also Tiger Moth rating as well many years ago. Okay, so we're looking into the circuit. All clear as far as I can tell. Clear on the left. Paraparaumu traffic, Delta Mike Oscar is overhead 1,500 feet, descending to join downwind runway 34 for the touch and go. So I'm just going to reduce the power a bit here as we start the descent to join the circuit at 1,000 feet. Keep a good look out. Once we're over the water, it's pretty much a good time to start turning downwind. There's 1,000 feet, so it's working out well. So as we level here, I'll just keep the power there and let that speed come back towards 100 knots. And at these speeds, you shouldn't really need more than 20 degrees angular bank in the circuit. do have that tailwind which is pushing us downwind, and you can see those hills there which I was mentioning before. So I'll bring the power back to about 1700 RPM so we can get the first stage of flaps out. So I'm just looking for the top of the wide arc, which is 85 knots, and we'll get flaps 10 going, and we need to start descending. Okay, there it is, so flaps 10 travelling. Come back to 1500 RPM so I can get my descent going, and we'll go flaps 20 just to help facilitate that descent. Okay, it's quite a long final now, so we'll make our turn in, looking for 70 knots or so. And you always want to be turning final around about 500 feet, so far so good. Fuel pump goes on, getting brakes checked, undercarriage down lock, mixture for rich, fuel cock on, quantities checked, hatches and harnesses are secure. Okay, there's that terrain I was talking about, so we'll just add a bit of power, have a look for the runway. There it is. Okay, we can see a red and a white on the Papi, so profile's pretty good. A little bit slow. Just keep that turn going. A bit turbulent. That takes a while. Okay, so we don't really need to make another radio call now. Looks like there's a bit of crosswind around. Pretty choppy conditions here. Seems to be a left to right crosswind. I'm going to set flaps full there. See how much power I've got on. I mean, there's too much power. You would not be flying an approach with so much power in the real aircraft. The flaps are just too draggy in the sim, I've found. You know, I need almost 2000 RPM to maintain 70 knots, descending at 500 feet a minute. I mean, it's just too draggy, it's not realistic. Pretty strong wind, it seems to be fading off a little bit actually. So I'll start bringing the power back. I'm aiming to touch down somewhere after the numbers, but before the touchdown markers there. And because of the crosswind, I'll need to kick it straight with the right rudder. So power's coming off. There's the right rudder. Hold the aileron into wind. Off centre line, but just keeping it straight. Oh, she straightens up pretty hard. You can see the windsock there on the left. So flaps back to 10. Try and keep the bloody thing straight. So yeah, almost all crosswind there. Going to full power. It's quite a long runway, so I've got plenty of runway. Just going to put my aileron into wind. And we should feel quite a bump as we rotate here. There it goes. There's the aeroplane weather vanes into the wind. Okay, I'm looking for 70 knots again. You can imagine that an engine failure at this point right here would not only ruin your day but quite a few other people's as well. But as soon as we get out of this point here, you can see there is some open space, but this is in reality it is not an ideal place to land, but it's better than going to someone's house. Otherwise you've got the beach, and in fact as we clean up the flaps we can simulate that. So big Paraparaumu traffic, Delta Mike Oscar is climbing out runway 34 simulating. So then we would just simulate an engine failure. So engine fails, first thing we're doing is looking for 60 knots. I know the wind's coming from the right, so we're going to land to the south. Put flaps 10 down now because I'm pretty close to the beach, and we'll just go for the other side of that river mouth. Maintaining, don't want to go below 60 knots. Flaps 20 and I'll just go straight for the beach there. I can use a little bit of side slip, so I've got top rudder on, so that's right rudder, left aileron, and that speed's built up quite a bit. And we're only simulating, so we'll say that we're assured of the landing, full power, and away we go. Back to flaps 10, looking for 70 knots. And we'll continue on our merry way. Paraparaumu traffic. Delta Mike Oscar is climbing away. be climbing to 1,500 feet southbound. Okay, flaps up. And we'll just stay close to the coast. So I don't want to be too far from land. So if we did have an engine failure, we don't want to end up in the drink. We always want to be able to make it back to land. State Highway 2 continuing south. This is Paikakariki and what we'd call the Paikock Hill. 1,000 feet, fuel pump goes off. And based on that flight plan I had before, we're going to go round to the west side and probably cut the corner over this lower part of... I'll tell you what, let's just go over Paikock Hill. It's going to be pretty rough with that wind. We're going to get... there's a few hill crossings which we'll be working through today, so we'll definitely get a bit of a feel for the turbulence in the sim, and we can discuss a little bit about some of the considerations when flying near high terrain and windy conditions. So with the wind level off at 1,500 feet. So with the wind coming from the southwest here, that means that we're going to get updrafts on this side of these hills and the sink on the other side. So ideally, crossing over while it looks like the best thing to do, place to go is straight through the middle there at the lowest point. That's going to give us probably not a great ride. So I'm just leveling off, listening for that tone change of the engine. Okay, there it goes, 2400 RPM, and just setting the trim there for level flight. So that's nose down trim. That'll do. You might need to climb a bit further. So we're getting blown from right to left. So the lift is going to be going up this side of these hills. So I really want to stay on the left-hand side, so the eastern side, in order to stay out of the sink, and turbulence we'll find on this side. So that means that we want to be on this right-hand side of the hill, of the valley. Sorry, the left-hand side of the valley, excuse me. And the other thing we need to keep in mind is if we are flying directly at it like this, and if we find we're not going to make it, we want to turn back, we've basically got 180 degrees of turn to do. And if I turn left, I'm turning into this higher terrain. If I turn right, I'm turning straight into the sink. So if I'm already running out of options, then turning right's not a good idea. So the better thing to do is to approach it at a 45-degree angle. You can see that because we're in the lee of this side, we're starting to get the turbulence. So we're actually going to track along this way. So if we need to turn right to escape, we can either go straight out over the coast, or we'll have a less than 180-degree turn to make to get out. So we've picked up quite a bit of climb. She's getting thrown around here. So we'll see if that smooths out as we cross over the ridge. Look at the sink. So we look at the vertical speed indicator. The attitude hasn't changed. So this is why you want to have that escape, so that we could just do a right turn straight back out down the valley. Now we're getting the climb. Amazing. So it's pretty well modelled. I mean, once we get gliders in this sim, it is going to be a lot of fun because it's pretty well modelled. So now I'm just sticking along the left-hand side of this valley, and I'm actually, you can't see it, but I'm pushing quite a bit of nose down stick here to maintain level flight because we're right in the lift. And just to, even though we're still getting a bit of turbulence, probably coming off this side here, but you can see I've got the nose down, we're climbing, and the speed is in the yellow. And I'll bring the power back a bit. So if I let it just cross over to the eastern side, sorry, the western side of the valley, you'll probably notice we get a lot more turbulence. There we go. So this is a time when you'd really want to be making sure you're underneath the VA, maximum manoeuvring speed, which is indicated by the top of the green and the beginning of the yellow one. So the western side of the valley is definitely a lot rougher, and you can see all the sink that we've got now as well. So not a nice place to be, and we're going to start picking up the turbulence off this ridge as well. So we definitely want to be on this side of the valley. So we'll make our way back over there now. Try and remain at 1500 feet. So being aware of where the winds are is very important when you're flying a light aircraft around, well, all terrain really, but obviously any hilly or mountainous terrain. Is really the difference between a smooth ride and a rough ride, and potentially even life or death if you get it badly wrong. And in an aeroplane like the 172, you know, it's a pretty underpowered aeroplane. You just do not have the power to get yourself out of trouble. So you've got to put the aeroplane in the right spot. And you've really got to fly it. I mean, I'm driving the aeroplane with positive control inputs to maintain the altitude I want to be at 1500 feet. And putting it where I want it. Okay, so you'll find with different wind conditions, particularly if your workload is increasing with traffic and radio calls and things, you'll soon find that you don't know where you are, and you're losing control of the airplane, and your situational awareness goes out the window. So it's really important to just always aviate first, fly the airplane, and put it where you want, because it's very easy to let the aeroplane just start doing its own thing and essentially flying you. So here is Paraparaumu, just on the nose there, and we're going to follow the road over the Haywards here, and in towards the Rimutakas on this side. So you can see the road running along there. So we'll start that left turn now. This is Whitby. It's a really nice suburb to the north of Wellington, about 30 minutes drive north of Wellington, and Pukeura Bay is further south there. This is Mana Island, a much smaller version of Kapiti. There's Kapiti back there. So these are all outlying suburbs that take you all the way into Wellington. But for now, we'll continue on our way, cutting that corner again. So we're going to get quite a bit of tailwind as we turn to the east here to cross over the Haywards. And you can see the terrain isn't particularly high around here, but it's definitely hilly enough that in windy conditions it's going to make us pay if we put ourselves in the wrong spot. On a day like this though, I mean, you're not going to get a smooth ride. It's just a question of avoiding the worst of it. So we will stay on the right hand side of the valley now, so the wind's coming from this direction. It's just going to be climbing over this ridge here, so we'll stay on that side. And the other thing to keep in mind is gliders, hang gliders, paraponts, all manner of recreational flyers are going to be trying to do the same thing. So while those guys might not have VHF radios like we do, so the gliders should, but not all of them do. You can see some power lines running along here. So another thing to keep in mind is that if we think it's a good spot to be, then potentially so does everyone else. So keeping a good lookout is absolutely crucial. Okay, here's the pylons. You can see we're getting a little bit low through here, so we'll get a bit of sink on the lee side of these ranges. So I'm just going to try and hold it steady, and we'll just see if we can. Here we go. So I haven't changed the nose attitude, and you can see how much sink we're getting. And with the power lines and the trees and the terrain, something to keep in mind. A lot of turbulence as we really get into the lee side of those hills. So now we want to be getting out of the way of those, don't we? So we need to start turning. We've lost 400 feet there. So you can really see how much force there is. So here's Silverstream. So we'll make our way to the north, and we're going to follow the road to where it travels into the Rimutaka ranges. Take it back up to 1500 feet, and we'll probably need to climb a bit higher than that to actually get over these ranges. And this is Upper Hut. There's a Lower Hut that's back behind us. And my friend Jace lives. Go Jace. Lovely morning. Put a bit of power on. So you can see that I've tried to get over to the right hand side or the eastern side of this basin, because we don't want to be in here where all the turbulence is over the river there coming off these hills. So we want to be basically erring on the side of the keeping ourselves into the updrafts rather than the downdrafts. And I'm going to just keep saying that over and over again, because it's the key factor we need to consider today. Alright, so I'm going to go to full power and take us up to 2,500 feet. See if we can make it across the ranges at that altitude. Again, having a good look out. And it's an aeroplane like the 172. It's a pretty light aeroplane, but it still has quite a bit of inertia, so even when the nose attitude changes abruptly with turbulence like that, not much else happens. So for instance, I can just apply a nose up input quite quickly, raise the nose attitude, and we'll see that the airspeed, nothing really changes. I'll have time to put it back down before much has happened, so I'll try that now. So I'll just put it up, we get the trend starts, but we've still got plenty of time to put the nose back down and the speed will recover. So you can get thrown around quite a bit in the aeroplane, and it won't really cause you too much of a problem in terms of airspeed changes and so on. So that's why really you just let the aeroplane fly through the turbulence. It's not comfortable, but you don't want to be fighting it and manhandling the aeroplane against the turbulence. You really just got to let it fly and make your way through it, because you're flying through a rough passage of air. It's not following you, you're moving through it. Okay, so if it's a bit bumpy in this spot, then don't worry, because pretty soon you'll be somewhere else. So we're always thinking ahead. So we can see we've got a couple of factors we're going to have to take into consideration here. One, we've obviously got the rising terrain on the east here, which we need to cross over, and we're flying into the sun, so lighting conditions are not good, so it's very hard to see any texture or depth perception on this ridge line. So it's a good silhouette of the ridge itself, but we don't actually have a good sort of gauge about how high we are. But as long as the nose is above the horizon, above the ridge, then I know we're going to clear it. So now we're getting a bit of sink. So there's the way the road goes through there. So we'll see the road coming up here. So we're going to do a right turn out this way. 3,000 feet seems to be fine. Pretty rough through here. And there's a river coming down, and the road should be following that as well. Maybe just further along. So we'll do a right turn here to try and avoid straight up getting into the lee of that ridge. Okay, you can see the road. I'm just going to try and keep around 3,000 feet here as a target altitude. I'll bring the power off a bit. Okay, alright, so we can see now we're into the sunlight. You see a lot more, right? We can see the trees, we can see, get a better feeling for how high we are. Got good altitude above the ridge. If I needed to turn around, I've got plenty of room in this valley on my right to turn. I'm going to cross it with a slight 45-degree angle in this direction, but we're going to get absolutely hammered as we cross over, unfortunately, but there's not much we can do about that. So aim point is just the northern end of the lake there, and now we're just hanging on for dear life, trying to keep it below the yellow arc and get through and out of the worst of the turbulence here. Okay. I think there's the train tracks actually. It's train tracks. So we'll continue a descent while we're on the other side. Wasn't too bad. And the mighty Tararua Ranges heading off towards the north there. So that's the hard part over. You can see that it's quite a wide, flat sort of basin that runs all the way up through the Wairarapa here to Masterton. And I crossed over a bit further south than I originally planned. So the road in Featherston, the main highway to State Highway 2 is actually coming out through here. That's Featherston there. So we continue our descent down to 1,500 feet. So let's see if I can see. So this was the railway line, and the road's on the other side of that ridge. all good. So we're now crossing towards the northern end of Lake Wairarapa. We've got about 10 miles to go to get to Martinborough. There it is, 1229. So this will be interesting. I've never flown to Martinborough, didn't know there was a strip there, so it could just be an agricultural aircraft strip, probably not designed for anything without a short field landing capability, but yeah, so we'll see how we get on. If there's a bit of wind around, then that will certainly help us, assuming it's headwind, because it will allow us to slow the aircraft down. But the 172, while you wouldn't call it a short field aircraft, it's perfectly fine for a lot of strip conditions. Probably the biggest problem is these wheel pants, that they're just fiberglass, so if you hit some rough ground, then they just can crack and break and just get damaged quite easily. And but being a tricycle undercarriage, then the handling is a piece of cake compared to a tail dragger. So the village of Martinborough is going to be on the nose here somewhere, but as we're flying to the sun, pretty hard to see. So yet again, we're flying at a time of day where it's going to be really difficult to find the airfield, and this airstrip I think will be a similar size, if not a bit smaller than Otaki. So I would imagine that this is going to be an interesting exercise, but we'll be able to slow the aeroplane down quite a bit, and that should, we've got plenty of time, heaps of gas, so we just keep making our way down towards 1500 feet. So good lookout still. Martinborough traffic, Delta Mike Oscar, Cessna 172, 5 miles to the west, 1,600 feet, we'll be joining shortly. Really is a beautiful day. If it wasn't for the wind, it would be a cracker of a day. So the airstrip and the township is on the other side of this river, off the eastern side of the river. Okay, it's 1,500 feet. I'm going to keep the descent going to 1,000 feet because I think that looks like it there. So I think being a bit lower could aid in identifying the airfield. And to be honest, I think I'd rather do a right turn, because if I turn left I'm going to be turning straight into the sun, and really the idea is to get this thing in sight sooner rather than later. So I'm going to bring the power back so we can slow down a bit, and I'm just going to drift to the north and see if we can find the airstrip with the right turn. So it means looking across the cockpit, which isn't ideal, but that's the lesser of the evils as far as I'm concerned, because if I'm turning left I'm going to be looking straight into that sun, which I'm not that keen on. So I'm levelling at 1,000 feet, just keeping the power around 2,000 RPM now, and that'll allow the speed to come back, so just gives me a bit more time as well. But I do have to be careful not to let it get too slow, and make sure I reset my trim. Alright, here we go again. Let me know if you can see it. Is that it there? Okay, it's actually just left of the nose, so I'm going to start a left turn, which will put the airstrip just on the right of the nose, I reckon. There it is. Okay, it's going to be interesting, isn't it? Look at that. So we've got trees on the northern side, pretty good approach, but we won't be able to fly it as a straight approach because of those trees. So we'll definitely be landing back towards the west here. I feel we're turning back into the wind, and the ground speed's really slowed down. We've been able to turn pretty much on top of the place. Okay, I'm going to put flaps down there and reduce the power. We'll just set up a gradual descent, and I'm just going to try and get onto the northern side of this trip so I can have a better look at it. A lot of these airstrips in New Zealand actually have sheep grazing on them because they don't always have aircraft on them, and it's productive land that you could have sheep grazing, and saves you mowing the lawn. Just watch that speed. Yeah, see the glare on the the windows, making it pretty hard to see. So one of the old tricks that we would do is just to do a bit of a low buzz pass down the airstrip there to make sure we'll clear the sheep out of the way. And we essentially call that a low approach and overshoot. So it's plenty long enough, no issues there. It's just a matter of getting ourselves organised on final to make sure that we are lining up. Okay, so we'll just extend a crosswind here and to the downwind, descending now to 500 feet for a low level circuit. So we're all clear to the right. Martinborough traffic, Delta Mike Oscar, joining downwind runway 27, low level, full stop. Okay, brakes are checked, down carriage down lock, mixture for rich, fuel cock is on, feels good. Hatches and harnesses are secure. So aside from the terrain on final, it's a pretty good little airstrip. The go round is nice and clear. It's going back to the west. And there's 70 knots. Just going to stay flaps 20 on the base turn, and I'm going to delay flaps 30, flaps 39 I think it is. And this is it. Flaps 30. Quite late because I've already got quite a bit of drag. So there's flaps 20. Okay, set. Fuel pump should be on. Took lights, turn them on. Alright, we'll just keep it coming around on this ridge here. And for a short field landing like this, 65 knots is good. So that's what I'm aiming for now. Okay, flaps 30 there. Okay, that's full flaps. 65 knots or so. And quite a bit of sink. So as soon as I pull that power off, she just starts sinking because there's so much drag with these flaps. Bit of turbulence. Can start to line up on short final there. 65 knots. So I'm coming back to 60. And just driving it in, and we'll start the flare. Power's idle now, and we just want to. There she is. Flaps up. Okay, just like that. So that was a pretty good little short field landing. You can see it's a very long runway. There's plenty of room here. So at this point we'll park her up. I don't know where. There's not much to see here, to be honest. So I think we'll just find the nearest tree and jump out, take a leak. That's about it. It's a bit hard to find the touch point. You'd think that it would be around here, but very hard to find. I'd move over a bit. I can do it. Transponder standby. Good. Alright, set all our lights off, fuel pump and go off. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed that. So we'll do a little debrief on the taxi in here. So we covered the circuit at Paraparaumu and the wind conditions and assessing wind and positioning the aircraft to, man, that looks awesome, to the light coming through the trees is really cool, isn't it? Talking about how we cross ridge lines, where to position yourself to reduce the turbulence, and always having that escape in mind, particularly in windy conditions like that. And also keeping in mind you could have an engine failure at any time as well. So if your engine stopped, you definitely want to be in a position where you can turn for low ground and try and position the aircraft to do a forced landing. So a few things to keep in mind. Let's just park up in these trees. Really nice lighting conditions on the foliage. Pretty long grass. That'll do. Lovely. Park and brake set. Idle back at 1,000. Alright, avionics goes off. Takes flight can go off. Yeah, so that's about it. I hope you got something out of that. Again, if you've got any questions, then by all means fire them through. You can find me on one of the Microsoft Flight Simulator Facebook pages as well. And if there's anything else you'd like me to cover specifically, then do let me know. Otherwise, I'll just keep making my merry way around New Zealand, pointing out a few sort of points of interest as we go. So maybe the next sector we'll climb a bit higher, talk about leaning the mixture if we fly a little bit higher. So that's about it for this one. Shut it down. Hope you enjoyed it. Here it goes. We're going to get this business again. Good, 36 minutes. Survived another one. Very cool. Thanks guys. See you later.